Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Inside the Mind of a Staffing Buyer. We'll let everybody kind of get situated here, but thank you all for joining us. We'll get started here in about 45 seconds. As you're getting set in, just a little bit of housekeeping. You can go ahead and put questions, comments into the webinar chat. And since it is the week before the Super Bowl, let's get the chat started and just tell me what you think is going to happen on the Super Bowl. So give me the winning team and the score. The winning team and the score. Who do you have in the Super Bowl? I've already got it figured out. That's one of the things that we're going to provide you today. So if nothing else, you'll be able to effectively gamble on the Super Bowl outcome. Chiefs 27-17, Christy, I apologize. That's not correct. Eagles 18-15. Wow, that's Eagles, gosh, it's good. It's close. Okay, we got 2 and 2 here. So keep putting those in as we get going. A couple of other things maybe more germane to today's conversation. We are recording. You'll get a copy of the slides. You also get a copy of the recording. In just a couple slides here, we're going to show you a QR code that gives you a free download of this full report that Darreon, our colleague Connor, myself, and a few others have really worked to put together. It's a fantastic report this year. I think it's going to be really, really impactful, really helpful. Our goal today is to really walk through that report as though we were all looking at the same report. So what I've asked Darreon to do is to go ahead and go through some of the key areas of that report, highlight what's going on there and kind of what that means. So as kind of a backdrop here, I'll give a full introduction to Darreon here in just a minute, but just give you a little bit about ClearlyRated. For those that don't know, I think most of you, if you're on this webinar, know us. Many of you, I recognize the names, know us quite well. We are the leading provider of client, talent, and internal employee satisfaction surveys within the staffing and recruiting space. We work with over 300 staffing and recruiting firms, both in North America as well as some international each year. And from that research, we also partner to pull together some really important research projects. And this is one of those. You'll also see our best staffing firms for women, along with our best of staffing for all of the best of staffing winners, whether you earned client, talent, internal employee, whether you've done it for 1 year or you've done it as a Diamond Award winner for 5 or 10 or even 15 years. Congratulations. This is not an easy business. This is not an easy time to be in not an easy business. And you've still been able to deliver value and create outstanding service performance. And it creates a real differentiation for you in the industry as well. I wanted to thank our sponsors as well. So on this study, we are really, really happy to have just top flight sponsors, the American Staffing Association, Career Builder Plus Monster, ClearEdge, as well as Staffing Referrals. It's because of these great brands that we're able to bring all of this research, which does have a pretty significant cost and time to it, to the industry at no cost. So thank you so much to all of our partners on this. So let's kind of transition here to the actual research report. There's that QR code that I had mentioned. That'll get you the full report. Like I said, I'm really proud of the work that went into the report this year. I think it reads very simply, very straightforward. You can utilize it. You can share it out with the rest of your team as well. And that's probably a good spot to really introduce my colleague, Darreon Day. Darreon Day heads our analytics and research function here at ClearlyRated and has done so for over a decade. He runs a team that is really focused primarily on the staffing and recruiting space and making sure that we are really providing this industry with what it needs to be successful in terms of current trends, what buyers want, what clients want, how to make sure that we're delivering a valuable experience that they're willing to come back for and continue to utilize us for. It's been a really tricky couple of years for those of you that have been on shows, webinars, and sessions with me. I've been talking a lot about the decoupling of temporary help with overall employment. We've seen that happen now where, we've had the longest downward slide this industry has ever faced. We've never been more than like 3 or 6 months out of sync with overall employment, which is to say that if, we're going down, then overall employment typically starts going down 3 to 6 months later. If we're going up, it usually means that overall employment's going up. And we've been really since October 2022 in a situation where if you're growing, first of all, congratulations because you're in the minority. If you are growing with any kind of significant growth, it really means that you have been able to carve out a niche. You've been able to really differentiate and be very strategic, or you've been able to really out execute in a very meaningful way the rest of the industry. And that's really what our focus was on this year when we reached out to these staffing buyers. So, Darreon, you know this research better than anybody else, and I thought for years you've sort of briefed me internally and been a source of a lot of what I share externally. It seemed like we're probably long overdue to just have you come on and share the research directly yourself. And so talk to us a little bit about the research, the methodology, some of the key demographics, and kind of what people can expect in today's call.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Appreciate the introduction. And yes, mirror all of the excitement around sharing these findings and trends with you all. It's we're really excited to be here today to talk about this important information. So, ClearlyRated has conducted this annual industry-specific research for more than a decade. As Eric mentioned, I've been a part of it for most of that time. And the primary purpose of our research here is basically establishing satisfaction benchmarks for the industries that we serve. We want to identify emerging trends and just generally study topics of importance to the industries that we're serving. And these topics are things that we're hearing from you all, things that we're hearing from our clients and prospects, but also things that we know of to be of general import to the industry. So this study has a large range of purposes that it serves for us. For the staffing industry in particular, we wanted to explore this year topics such as current and ideal service experiences, as well as perceptions of technology and AI. And specifically diving into areas of buyer behavior as well. So this study fielded in Q4 of last year in 24. The overall study surveyed almost 1,200 buyers and users of B2B services, as well as a subset of 505 staffing firm clients and buyers. And you'll hear me use both the term clients and buyers throughout today's webinar. And that's on purpose because for our purposes here, those are one and the same. These are confirmed staffing firm clients, but they also answered questions about the decision-making process and the things that they go through during that journey. So one thing that's different this year is that it marks the first time that this is a global effort on our part. So we actually wanted to include respondents from several other countries outside of the United States this year. So we focused on the UK, Canada, and Australia. So we actually have global results to share with you all, and most of the results that you'll see today are global stats and figures. If you want some specific market insights, we have some of those broken out into the longer form report that you can download. And yeah, so let's dive into some profile of respondents here, just to kind of give you a general background of who these people are that are answering. Median age is 41. The respondent organization size broken out by number of employees or headcount is identified at the top right. So we have nearly half in that kind of mid-size bucket of 100 to 999, and then we've got 35% at the larger organizations of 1,000 or more. But we do have a fairly good distribution across organization size there. The top industries represented from these staffing firm clients are software technology, manufacturing, financial services, healthcare, retail, and construction. We actually have a pretty broad representation across many different industries about who, from respondents who answered this survey. This is just the top few that we have representation on. And then we also did ask the question of the types of positions hired through staffing firms. And we found that the top amongst this audience, the top types of positions are office clerical, engineering, IT, scientific, professional, managerial, and industrial in that order. Generally, all have pretty solid representation in our sample, so we have a pretty good mix of the types of positions that people are hiring for. Let's go through today's agenda real quick. As Eric mentioned, there are the 10 key trends that are outlined in that downloadable report. What you'll notice is that we have broken out those 3 trends for the purposes of today's webinar, those 10 trends for the purpose of today's webinar into 3 larger categories that we're going to present to you all. And we have reordered the trends a little bit, so it won't be appropriately numbered versus the report, but everything is in there and with greater detail and greater takeaways as well. So highly encourage the download. We're first going to go into macro trends impacting staffing clients. So these are things like economic uncertainty, and then as well as things like increasing in automation investment, as well as AI. AI is everywhere, and staffing firm clients are no exception to wanting clarity and help with AI implementation, both internally and understanding what that means for their external partnerships. Then we're going to go into the staffing buyer mindset. We're going to look into why some negative perceptions of staffing are still prevalent, how buyers are seeking to de-risk their purchase decisions as they're going through that journey, talking about day one firms, and we'll definitely explore that in more detail and define what that means. And then also looking at the value of thought leadership that can play in the decision-making process. Then we're going to move into Eric's favorite topic, which is maximizing client experience. We're going to start with a little bit of backdrop that staffing firms aren't always meeting client expectations currently, and then move into ways that we can address that, specifically around communication and the importance of that in satisfaction and retention, and then also highlighting specific factors of onboarding processes and how that can maintain healthy relationships throughout that partnership.
Let's jump into the big stuff. This is, I think, where it gets really interesting. So, and just a reminder to everybody, we're going to kind of pause in each of these sections and kind of go back and forth, take some questions from the audience as well. So be thinking of your questions. Don't have to wait for them. Go ahead and just put them into the chat or into the Q&A tab. But Darreon, let's start at the high level. Let's walk through some of the macro trends that the research tells us.
Yeah, absolutely. So trend 1, hiring managers remain uncertain about the economy. So notice that we use the term uncertain. We don't use the term overly pessimistic or overly optimistic. In fact, if you look at this top figure that we share here, we actually have 50% of buyers that are currently rating economic conditions as fair, only fair or poor. And by the flip side of that, we have 50% that are rating is either good or great. And so what this means is that economic outlooks are split, and that is causing some uncertainty. We've got some sections that are feeling more optimistic than others, and some that are feeling more pessimistic. In terms of where they think the economy is headed, we've got 41% thinking that the economy is getting worse, and 33% thinking that things are getting better, or believe things will be better in the future. So the way that these are phrased and the methodology behind this matches the Gallup Economic Confidence Survey. So that's just kind of a backdrop for this that we wanted to provide. It's been around forever if you're familiar with that Gallup survey, and we wanted to get specific insights from this audience. And what we find is kind of a mixed bag, which probably isn't surprising to a lot of folks on the call, but does serve as a good kind of baseline for where we're at. Furthering into kind of what that means for these organizations that are our staffing buyers, many organizations are bracing for changes. So we've got 78% that are currently undertaking or predicting salary adjustments to existing employees. We've got a similarly high ratio that are undertaking or predicting outsourcing some job functions. And then we have 61% that are undertaking or predicting a full hiring freeze. So that latter one there is, more likely, obviously, on those that are more pessimistic on their outlook of their economy. But what this kind of really highlights is that organizations are bracing for change in terms of the talent sources, outsourcing, the potential salary adjustments they're making, potential hiring freezes or temporary hiring freezes, things like that. So positioning, during this economic uncertainty is pretty key. So being in that strategic partner and providing flexibility during uncertainty are definite upsides and opportunities that we have. We'll dive into a little bit more on this in our Q&A at the end of this section. Trend 2 that we want to go through here is buyers increasingly investing in automation. So automation definitely on the rise for many of these organizations that we surveyed. 83% are already investing or anticipate doing so in the very near future. So you've got a healthy majority that are going to have at least some level of automation in their processes, and this is specific to the hiring process, should be stated. We've got 2 and 3 of those that are already investing in automation that have increased their spend in the past 2 years. So not only are we seeing, automation becoming a priority for many, it's actually, the velocity has increased in a lot of cases. And then we've got 59% that are implementing automation specifically to reduce labor requirements. So definitely automation is here. And as I mentioned, velocity is increasing. So important for us to be aware of this and to meet clients where they're at in order to both help them with this implementation as well as this next slide that I'll share, meet them at these process points as well. What's being automated in the internal recruitment process? So these are the process points with at least partial automation from our staffing clients currently. We've got 77% that have at least some automation in the resume screening and sourcing process, 74% in compliance and record keeping, and then so on. And through this list where we've got greater than 70% majorities that have at least partial automation in many of these areas. So we need to be prepared to help organizations in these automation efforts where applicable, as well as understand how our own internal automation within the industry can help clients. So talent needs in general, obviously, this has a lot of far-ranging impacts, but talent needs in general will also be changing as a result of this automation. So planning will be key. And again, we'll dive into this a little bit more. Last trend on the macro side of things is that buyers are wanting clarity on and help with AI to help them with kind of the uncertainty that they feel at the moment. So AI usage among staffing firms has increased and has arrived and is increasing, I should say. So we've got 58% that have either adopted it already into some of their internal hiring processes, and we've got 32% that claim intermediate to advanced adoption of this AI into these processes. So AI is definitely here, and these numbers are continually going up based on our research and research that we see elsewhere. We actually have nearly 9 in 10 clients that have surveyed that have either adopted some AI processes or are exploring them. So if you're not adopting them, you're actively exploring them. And if you're not, and these are our staffing buyers. If you're not, then you are behind for these organizations. But the flip side is that AI implementation and business impacts are hard to project. We've got 27% of all buyers that aren't feeling confident in their organization's ability to use AI in their internal talent acquisition processes. So the flip side, obviously, is that the majority are feeling at least somewhat confident, but we do have a sizable chunk there that just have so much uncertainty they don't even trust their own organization's ability to leverage AI properly during this process. So presents us an opportunity. kind of a more general statement about AI is that 54% agree that AI's impacts, are overstated specifically on their organization. So this kind of goes back to that uncertainty and kind of the coin flip, right? You've got 54% that are saying AI is overstated. The flip side of that coin, 46% are saying that it's either accurately portrayed or potentially understated, meaning that we have clients, we need to be meeting clients where they're at, and helping them understand these impacts and how we can best serve them as they're going through this journey. Last piece on this section is where staffing firm clients have the highest expectations in terms of how staffing firms may be implementing AI. So how to read this chart is at this top bar here, the speed of candidates provided. We've got 74% of our buyers that expect AI to actually improve the speed of candidates provided, and so on and so forth down this list. So how we read this is that AI, there's some uncertainty about AI in general. There's uncertainty about how they're going to introduce AI into their own internal processes, but they know that they have high expectations of it based on what they've heard, and perhaps based on their experience so far. So, and those expectations definitely are not limited to their own internal abilities. They extend to you all into this industry, and they have high expectations about service increases and outcomes. The points on the right are kind of just baseline points for us to keep in mind too. So 73% of clients are expecting AI to allow them to hire more quickly in general. And then that kind of matches with that top boxed point there. And you can see the similar proportion. So if they expect that their own processes will improve, you better believe that they're going to expect your processes to improve as well. And with that, let's take a second to pause here and kind of digest that a little bit. So, Eric, I kind of wanted to open it up to you. You spent a lot of time with this data in particular, and with other data of many staffing clients in the industry. So, what stood out most to you from this year's research?
There's a couple things I think, honestly, Darreon, that were really interesting to me. The investment in sort of automation in their process, I thought was really interesting. And we certainly see, people, whether it's utilizing these AI models or otherwise, just recognizing that everything that they do has to be put through this kind of constant sieve around efficiency to make it more and more efficient, time and time again. And then when we look at this, the way I'd summarize kind of what the data tells us on AI is they're like, oh, AI is really, amazingly powerful. We don't know how we're going to harness it, but we better believe that you're going to be able to harness it, and leverage it that way. So I think I think there's just a lot of sort of macro level things going on right now that make this a really interesting time in this industry, and candidly, challenging, right? I think back to years when, kind of the biggest, frustration point was like, oh, VMS, are we going to do VMS? Are we going to have a VMS strategy? Are we going to approach this? And now really, we're trying to understand, okay, how do we compete against, increased offshoring? How do we compete against increased automation in the, industrial warehousing space? How do we, battle against AI models removing, the need for as many call center employees or things along those lines? So there's just a lot of shifting, a lot of strategic shifts that are going to happen in the next 3 or 4 years. And I think it's a really, really important time to, be really executing well in the current year, while also, doing some experimentation as to the types of things that are going to open the door and create real value going forward. And then the last thing, and everybody's really seen this for the last couple of years, is that really anything that's not positioned as a cost savings is really tough to get through the door right now. And so you've got to make a connection to how utilizing you doesn't just take work off their plate, you've got to, do the work to really bring it back around to how it's going to free up resources, whatever it is, to where it actually costs less to use you than it would others. And that doesn't mean that you have to be the low cost provider. I'm not saying that. It just means that you have to have a really clear story as to the value you're creating, and how ultimately that is justifying the costs that you have there, because it's just coming under a different level of scrutiny than what we've seen as well. But what's your take on the AI and automation piece?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely mirror a lot of those sentiments. There's the a lot of the stats that we got back on AI and automation and economic uncertainty. We're kind of hovering right around 50-50 or 55-45. So you have a lot of diverging opinions, both on kind of where we're at currently in a macro state and also kind of where things are headed. And so I think there's no one silver bullet to help us here, but it's just kind of planning accordingly and understanding where parts of the process are being automated at our clients' organizations, where we can help in those scenarios, where we can be automating our own internal processes, and kind of finding that balance of automation and service and high touch point when they want it. And yeah, there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of risks, and so it's and any clarity that can be provided is definitely a win for this industry right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to move us actually to this next section, because I end up in conversations, Darreon, so often with people that are saying, "Hey, we're trying to re-energize, reinvigorate our sales function, because for some time that was secondary, really, to being able to fill the orders and the candidate side of it. But we're having to really kind of roll up our sleeves and find new logos and find new opportunities within our existing accounts." And the section that I think actually has the most really relevant Win 2025 kind of information is that second section. So why don't you run us through kind of the buyer trends there?
Yeah, absolutely. So this section we're titling the staffing client mindset. Could be also titled the buyer mindset. This is, where, as Eric mentioned, it's kind of helping us understand this journey that they're going through. I'm going to start by kind of backing up a little bit and saying that, giving us a baseline that, negative perceptions of staffing are still prevalent. We'll start out with the good news. Most clients agree, that recruiters bring additional expertise. Staffing firms can help keep hiring processes compliant, speeding up the hiring process, gives flexibility, and helps reduce turnover of temporary employees. So we asked a large battery of questions to these respondents, and the industry as a whole gets high marks for speed and flexibility offered. And so, leveraging those strengths is going to be important. Also important to really understand where the industry is perceived as weak right now. Hiring through staffing firms is too expensive. As Eric mentioned, everything's under scrutiny. Some of this can be education too. Not everybody always knows how expensive things are and aren't, and we do see that in our research. But just in general, budgetary restrictions, there's just so much of that conversation out there right now. Other challenges, right? Other talent solutions offer more flexibility than staffing firms. So more than half agree. And keep in mind who this audience is, right? These are people that are using staffing firms. And so this isn't just a general sample of all B2B buyers. So it is important to understand that in some places we're working against headwinds, against competition outside of the industry. Staffing firms are only good for sourcing less skilled temporary workers. Again, just over half are saying that. Staffing firms behind the times when it comes to strategies, 47% say yes. And then candidates sourced through staffing firms are inferior to talent source, so through other sources, so 45% there. So not to harp on this too much, but it is important to kind of understand, where a lot of these perceptions are rooted in. And look at buyers' perspective perceptions of staffing and capitalize on what they value, as well as using the perceived weaknesses as kind of buyers' pain points and use them for differentiation is why we show this information. The next trend that we're going to go through is buyers seeking to de-risk their purchase decision. So that statement alone is not necessarily earth-shattering, but it's kind of how they're going about doing this. When vetting staffing firms, the most influential factors buyers are considering are some of these things that we're showing here. So specialization in specific industries and strong firm performance metrics, as well as reputation, referrals, and testimonials from current clients. All those things asked about were at least somewhat influential to a vast majority of clients. So starting to the differentiation amongst these is probably where we see the very, very influential versus the somewhat influential breakout. So you can see, some of the things really come to the top there. The staffing firm reputation at 71% being very influential. So a lot of this is, your brand doing the selling for you. And a lot of these things are things that we can actively influence as well. So testimonials from current clients, making sure, following best practices on sharing testimonials, using that as a part of the sales process, and all of those kind of things can really kind of meet clients where they're at with the types of information that they find influential. Some things you'll notice on here that aren't influential are things like, marketing and advertising, and social media and blog posts. I'm not saying that those things aren't influential at all. They are, according to our surveyed respondents here, but they are definitely at the bottom of this list. So when you're talking about relative importance, they pale in comparison to some of these other areas. How our buyers are starting their journey in terms of where they're seeking information. We've got 58% that turn to online vetting, and 42% that turn to referrals first. So this is specifically the first step that they take in their process, and that's an important distinction too. So what this tells us is that online reputation and managing, how the brand is showing up is as important as ever. And what types of information buyers are looking for online are kind of a mix of all of these things that we've been talking about. So these are in order of the most commonly things searched for online. We've got testimonials from existing clients, firm expertise, satisfaction ratings, and evidence of specialization. So you'll notice key themes are kind of that social proof. So we're talking about testimonials from clients. We're talking about ratings from clients. Can this firm, prove that? Can this firm prove that it delivers what it promises? We also talk about things like specialization in their industry and firm expertise. This kind of helps us answer that question. Can this firm help my business specifically? And then other things, going back to the previous slide of, performance metrics and brand reputation kind of in general is this firm established and stable is another thing that we're trying to answer through our online vetting process. Moving on to our next trend, I mentioned the day one firms or day one brands. These brands have the best chance of winning business. So what this means is your brand on the short list of consideration in a potential buyer's mind before they do any other action on their decision-making journey? So the impetus to kind of research this, it actually came from some research that Google and Bain did on kind of general B2B buyers. That actually found that 81% of B2B buyers have what they call a day one list. So, firms they have a history with, firms they've heard of, firms they've been referred to, firms they've seen online, whatever the case may be. They have a few brands in mind. And typically what we found is that our specific buyers here, while they didn't have quite, while not as many had a day one list, 65% did. Those that did almost universally eventually selected one of those firms on that list. So 93% of those buyers ultimately selected a firm from that list. And we found that the average or the median number of firms on a day one list is 3 brands. So this was really interesting, and we wanted to kind of mirror that more generalized Google and Bain research in order to get this slice just for the staffing industry and staffing buyers in particular. And it just kind of goes to prove, being on that day one list is really important. And there's a lot of different ways that we can go about that. And Eric and I will kind of get into that in a bit here. But this is, yeah, being on that day one list has the best chance of winning business in 2025. Last trend in this section is that clients and prospect. Actually, sorry, two more trends. This trend is that clients and prospects place a high value on thought leadership. And what we found is that 91% of staffing buyers say that thought leadership or industry insights influence their decision as they're going through that. And so this is thought leadership or insights shared from a particular brand and asking them to rate how influential that is in their final purchase decision. So that's a pretty hefty majority that say they're placing value on thought leadership and any sort of educational materials that can help them through this uncertain time, can help them improve their processes, can help them understand, what AI is, how to use AI, all those types of things. We asked specifically about the most valuable thought leadership topics for this audience, and based on how influential they are to potential buyers. And we found that the 5 bullets listed here are the top 5 things that we should, as an industry, be focused on providing to these buyers in order to help them and influence them in this decision-making process. And these are things like employee engagement and retention, talent acquisition strategies, improving the candidate recruitment process to attract high quality candidates, effective onboarding, and then compliance and regulation as well. So I was correct originally. There's only that one last trend there. So Eric, wanted to take a step back here and kind of talk through some of the things that we just went through. You and I have talked a lot about the concept of that day one list. Wondering if you might be able to kind of go through some of the implications that this can have for staffing firms.
This to me, Darreon, is probably the biggest finding in the last 5 years of this study that we've done. This day one list to me was so eye-opening, in part because I would never have guessed it was that high, and for B2B. And then when we went back and we actually were able to almost exactly replicate it, right, with directionally the exact same findings, which is that roughly 2/3 of the time somebody has a list of staffing firms in mind, short list, right, 2 to 3 firms that they're like, oh, okay, that should definitely be reaching out to them. The fact that 9 out of 10 times, more than 9 out of 10 times, that if they have that day one list, a firm that starts on that day one list gets chosen, it just kind of blew my mind. And so you start to think about this, you're like, okay, so I have to be on day one lists, full stop. If I'm going to add new logos, it's because I'm on that day one list. And it's probably not fair to think that your sales team's going to get you on very many of those day one lists, right? It has to be the right time. It has to be compelling. You have to break through a lot of sales noise. And so now it kind of puts it back, where I love to live, right? My background is marketing. And so it puts it back in the marketing side. And it's really kind of going back to, marketing 101, right? And being on that awareness set, initial awareness and in that consideration set. And then I think it dovetails really nicely with what we're seeing is like, okay, so how do I get in that space? Well, thought leadership matters a lot. Okay, well, that's great. There's still a ton of staffing firms that do what I do. Now we think back to the other stat that you had around specialization and how impactful specialization is. And so to me, just a whole bunch of different things cascade that I think are different than a lot of staffing firms are approaching here, which is basically saying, hey, you probably just don't want to go and say, hey, here are some of the key areas around hiring trends, or here's our take on remote work or hybrid work arrangements. It's probably not enough, right? You probably need to go a step or even 2 steps deeper, right? You need to go and you need to say, okay, at call centers, here's how people are blending technology and people to make this work. At a pick and pack, in a warehouse location where we're doing pick and pack, here are the key trends that are driving retention forward on that piece. It's not enough just to talk retention, right? Because it's very different from a call center to a warehouse to an IT firm, right, across the board. So I think you have to look at this. And what I've been telling people, Darreon, and I really believe this is, everybody has probably, I don't know, 10, a dozen, in their mind, these ideal customer profiles. And if they, see a lead come across, a referral maybe or something like that, it just, their eyes light up, right? For us, if it's a, mid-size 50 million to $500 million staffing firm that's at, and that lead comes in and they're saying, hey, we really want to, improve retention of our talent and, differentiate in the marketplace. And my eyes light up, right? Because that's right in our wheelhouse. We do more of that than anybody else. And so I know I can add a ton of value beyond just what our platform adds, right? And beyond just the expertise that we have around satisfaction surveys, we have a lot of experience in that specific space. Well, everybody on this call has those same things. I'd really encourage you to write some of those down and then put yourself through this hard, set of questions of, okay, well, what are you doing to go get 10 more of those? What are you doing to build a community of 100 people just like that in this area? And that's the piece that I think a lot of people are missing. They're going too broad. And in fact, when we start to struggle to meet our sales goals, what do? We tend to go, okay, well, who else could use our services? And I think you're actually going to have better. And the people I see really kind of having success right now, they're actually going deeper into that spot as well. So do have a couple questions here. So I'm going to go into the questions on this while we're at this spot, Darreon. One of the questions is, do you find it more applicable to a retail transactional customer versus MSP type programs? And I think that this is talking through the day one list. It's a different buyer, right? It's more about the partner and getting on the MSP programs in that scenario. But my guess is that you would find kind of the same thing, right? As these MSPs look, as they're trying to build capability, it's very similar, right? How are you reaching out to them? How are you being a part of that as well? Question for you, Darreon. Can you elaborate on how staffing organizations are actually using AI? Do you have any specific examples of where they're finding success that you can share? Anything that you've seen, and then I'll add to it as well. Full disclosure, I don't have a ton on this, but go ahead.
Yeah. Specific examples would be AI implementation specifically in the process around communication in terms of triggering emails or perhaps scripting emails or other points of communication. So potentially scripting text messages to client. Some of this is applicable to the talent side as well. But we do see that our stats definitely show that the expectations for responsiveness and for just the number of points of communication and just kind of being constantly in contact with staffing firms, those expectations are increasing. And so we have actually, I do have a couple of recollections of specific firms implementing that into their processes and making sure that there are processes in place for that constant communication, that proactive communication, which we know is so important to both sides of this relationship. And Eric, I think you had one other one that you were sharing with me too.
Yeah, so there's a couple things I'm seeing, and to be honest, almost everything that I'm seeing actual firms doing right now around AI is very much in the early phases. We see our software as well as other software are doing a much better job of utilizing these AI tools for data cleanup as well as making sense of these large bodies of data. That's one of the places where I know staffing firms are leaning in on some of the AI. To Darreon's point, some of the communication tools, some of the chat bots and some of the other areas are starting to build in, I would say, just smarter versions of those knowledge centers that have existed in the past. But what I would say is that we're very, very early in those phases, and I think everybody's kind of trying to experiment with multiple different things, whether it's around making their recruiters, account managers more efficient, whether it's around shortening the time from question to answer with clients, with candidates. I know there's a lot of Bullhorn and others have some really strong AI tools around the screening process and a few things like that. But I haven't found anything where I'm like, oh, okay, that is absolutely ridiculous what they're pulling together there. There's I think we're still early stages on some of that those pieces of it as well. I want to make sure that we're running a little bit low on time, and so I want to make sure that we get into the client experience piece, Darreon. So why don't you take us through, top level findings there, and then we'll have one more session for, final questions here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So diving into client experience here, again, I kind of have this first trend here as kind of a backdrop to kind of where we are today. So staffing firms aren't meeting client expectations in a hefty, chunk of the interactions. We have 44% of our clients surveyed say they have experienced a candidate placement that did not match their expectations. So that is, it's nearly, we're getting close to 50% there. And reminder that these are staffing firm users. So we know that they have a history and an understanding and multiple assignments potentially in many cases. And so what we do find, perhaps unsurprisingly, is that, this mismatch of expectation to placement is severely hurting client loyalty. And we're in retention and satisfaction. You can use a lot of approximate terms there. We measure this in terms of our net promoter score that results from these two different groups. So among clients who have not experienced this issue of kind of a mismatch expectation with the candidate, we have a 53 NPS, which would be considered kind of a really solid NPS, which would actually qualify for best of staffing. And then we also have the flip side of that. So those that are experiencing this issue have a 24% lower NPS here, which is at a 29 amongst those who have experienced this issue. So we find that service matters, and we find that and obviously that matching expectations early and often matters, and we'll go into that in a second as well. But some other common failures that we found from current clients is that we had 36%, so more than 1 in 3 said that an unanswered phone call or email to a primary contact, they experienced that. And then we also had 36% that said unexpected turnover of talent placed by the firm. So talent was on assignment and experienced unexpected churn there, and that was experienced again by over 1 in 3. So moving into this next piece, wanted to really emphasize what we found about communication. So Eric and I I don't think we'll ever get tired of talking about communication, but it's definitely not a story that is new to us. This is showing that the level of communication, the frequency of communication is significantly correlated and shows a vast swing in resulting NPS, again, which would be our loyalty or satisfaction metric, however you want to phrase that. Constant, or daily contact while on assignment. Those clients have a 59 NPS. If you have a regular, or several weekly, perhaps, still a pretty solid NPS at 51. That's quite solid. Then when we start going to the semi-regular and then all the way down to the rare, and again, this is while a placed candidate is on assignment, you see that NPS really start to crater as that those communication ratings go down, as likely expectations are not being met, updates are not being followed through with, and there's just a disconnect in that relationship. So clearly the frequency and manner of communication matters significantly. The last trend here on this section that I kind of wanted to take us through was how some of these common onboarding missteps can affect client satisfaction, and thereby showing how effective onboarding processes are so critical. So in the parentheses here, we have in the table on the left side, in the parentheses, we've got the number of firms that have experienced this mistake from their staffing firms specifically at the onboarding step. And so, failure to leverage technology to streamline the process, 16% have experienced that, whether, that's a specific failure of systems or technologies. They are, as a whole, 22 points lower in NPS than those that didn't experience that. Similarly, this is how we read those other 2 lines in this chart here. Failing to establish clear expectations. We had 13% that say that expectations were not established clearly at the onboarding stage specifically. That resulted in a lifetime or a whole partnership level of satisfaction decrease of 21 points in NPS, and then again failing to properly introduce team members and key contacts. That's pretty basic, right? But we've got 16% of clients that are saying that was missed at the onboarding stage, and that resulting NPS dip is 20 points. So what this basically is telling us is that we've got onboarding is a key to establishing the relationship, and failures at this point in the process matter, not only then but throughout the length of assignment and throughout the length of that entire partnership with that staffing firm. So Eric, we're at this last Q&A section here. I wanted to ask you a few questions on the things that we were just chatting through. So what do you see as the key takeaways from this year's research into the client experience?
Communication, communication, communication. And I put this into the chat, but I'll say it here as well if people aren't following the chat. What we seem to find on that over and over again, and you kind of alluded to this, I feel like we ask this in a variety of different ways just because it keeps on, coming in all the time. And this is for the clients, right? This is the communication, Joe, your question in the chat. This is the communication that clients are hoping to have with the staffing firm, not what they're expecting you to have with their place talent, although they are expecting you to stay in close contact there. The reality is that anytime we've kind of dove into this, it's really not even so much what you're reaching out about. It's just that you're reaching out. You're checking in, you're staying proactive. Those are the things that I think matter a lot there as well. And so what I would just tell people is make sure that you are not only communicating, but make sure that you're bringing some visibility to communication as well, because it is one of the easiest things for your account managers, your recruiters to skip over, because there's not an immediate reaction to that. And so it is the silent killer of loyalty and relationships. And it doesn't do it if you don't, reach out today, doesn't do it if you don't reach out tomorrow, but that turns into a week, turns into a month, turns into a few months. And next thing you know, you're without that opportunity at that client there as well. So I think that's a really key issue there. I wanted to hit some of the questions that are coming up here in the Q&A. And so one of the questions that we have here is what are some of the trends that you all are seeing in terms of client retention? Do you have anything on that? Darreon, do you have anything? I've got some.
Yeah, I'll have you lead on that. I know my role as analyst, I have that data somewhere, but Eric's recall is top notch. So let's see what he's got.
Well, so what I would say is that we're seeing not massive changes in actual retention, but what we are seeing is some overall churn that I believe is related. I put a bunch of these things under this kind of inflation umbrella, which has caused really outsized challenges for our industry. So as the inflation, as the interest rates went up and the inflation went up, that drove up labor costs, has a disproportionate impact on us as an industry, because then what we're having is we're becoming less competitive from a cost standpoint, and certainly the perception on that. And so what we're seeing here is people are answering questions a little bit differently around sort of the value given the cost. Is it a good value given the cost? We're seeing that come down a little bit, and we're seeing less people widespread leaving their staffing firm, more so that in order that used to be 10 people is now 7 people or 4 people, and that's really the biggest challenge on that piece of it. What we are seeing, however, is that as people are consolidating programs, they're also consolidating vendors. And so there are opportunities that come with that silver lining as well, which is to say that if you're one of 7 or 8 vendors on there, that's what I would be really going after, is like, okay, what do we need to do? I'd be staying very close with them. I'd be doing whatever you can to add value beyond sort of, the stated contract value, because we are seeing a lot of programs that are going from, 10 down to 4. And that creates some real opportunities within your existing pool to add volume in ways. The other thing that I'm seeing too is, the headcount piece might be going down. So how do you offset some of that with additional services, additional product lines? We're seeing some people have some real success with really focusing on, okay, we're not going to have the same headcount here with this large client of ours. What other challenges do you have? You trust us, you just don't need as many people. So let's take that trust, the fact that we know your business really well. We still have a large portion of people here. What are some other challenges that you're dealing with? And let us, bring a compelling solution and take that headache off of your plate. We're seeing some people have some real success with that component of it as well. We're close to time here. We got time for probably one more question. The question I guess I would have for you, Darreon, is this is a client version of the report, but we do see I think you just got out of the field with the job candidate, the job seeker side of it. So little teaser for more to come there. And talk a little bit about the relationship between the assignment success rate and the candidate experience and what we see with client satisfaction, because obviously they are intertwined.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great teaser, Eric. I like this. Yeah, absolutely. It's talent experience, and we could define that as success rate, but just talent experience is a kind of a generalized term, is definitely closely associated with client experience or client satisfaction. Poor talent experiences, they're going to lead to churn and which in turn hurts client outcomes and client satisfaction and loyalty and all of those things. So obviously, the talent experience, it involves a lot of different factors. What we've seen so far preliminarily, but knowing what we know, we're pretty confident that some of the key drivers of talent satisfaction are going to be, ensuring accuracy and expectations of the position. So again, like expectations, we talked about it a lot on the client side here, expectations at onboarding, the big miss in candidates not meeting expectations and how that influences satisfaction. Same is absolutely true on the talent side, if not more so. If you're presenting me an opportunity and it's wildly different than than what I was presented, obviously that is not a recipe for success. Other things we dive into are quick issue resolution. So issue resolution is a big deal on the talent side, and the quicker that we can resolve those, the higher satisfaction we see. Also, quick response to calls and emails, again, getting into the key of communication piece. And then another part of communication, which is really prevalent on the talent side in terms of their importance, is the contact prior to the end of the assignment. That's a big piece. And Eric and I always use the term, black box. The staffing industry has a lot of black boxes that people, feel like they fall into in terms of communication and they don't hear. Sometimes it's happening at the end of assignment and it's just, thank you, see you later, or maybe not even thank you.
Yeah.
It's just a black box. And so we see that, this group that experiences solid communication at that point is, wildly much more satisfied than the group that doesn't in, orders of magnitude. So, as Eric mentioned, we're going to have a full report on this audience and a webinar as well, and it'll be in the works. And we're really going to dive into these areas and a lot of other topics on the talent side as well.
I'll leave you and the audience with this. I've run this analysis. I don't even know if I've shared this with you. I've run it with a couple of different staffing firms, actually now 4. And what we find is that well over 50%, like closer to 60% of all fires and quits happen within the first week of an assignment, which is not terribly surprising, but it really puts a point on that. And over half of those that happen in the first week happen on the first day. And so as you're looking at this, the impact that you can have, like when you're trying to triage, like where do we start, on the candidate side and really on the hiring manager side, like make sure you're winning that first week of any new assignment, and make sure, as part of that, you're not going to win the first week unless you win the first day. And so really hone in on that as well. We look forward to sharing that data with you as well when it's available. So finally, just want to thank everybody for participating today. We had a great audience, some great questions, engagement from the group. Darreon, thank you. You work tirelessly behind the scenes, you and Connor and the rest of the team to really bring this to light. So thank you so much for the hard work that you put in this as well. To everybody out there, 2025 is going to be a great year, but it's not going to be simple. We're going to have to go out and out execute. We're going to have to really know where we create the most value and go for those spaces. So I just encourage you to do that. Wish you all the best of luck. If we can be of any assistance at all, please reach out to us and our team. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.